Welcome back to the Something in the Wilderness podcast, a music discussion podcast about the songs of Andrew McMahon. We've been discussing Jack's Mannequin songs for the past few months because it is the year of the return of Jack's Mannequin. However, we don't want to forget about all the other great work that Andrew's done. Keeping in line with what I did last year, I do want to once again mark the anniversary of the release of Tilt at the Wind No More. We've had this album in our lives for 2 full years as of this month, believe that or not. And in a way, it seems like longer ago, because so much has happened in the world of Andrew McMahon since then. We've had 2 legs of a Tilt at the Wind No More tour. We've had When We Were Young with Something Corporate. We've had a full Something Corporate tour. We've had the Holiday from Real cruise last fall. And now on the way, we've got a full Jack's Mannequin tour, including a stop at the iconic Red Rocks venue. So lots of news in the world of Andrew McMahon, lots going on. But we don't want to forget about this awesome album that came out 2 years ago. Now, you may have heard me talk about the Holiday from Real cruise plenty lately on this show. And I'm not going to talk about it too much today, but I think it is a great opportunity to spotlight one of the friendships that blossomed from that experience. First, I want to go back a little bit further before we get there, though. So last summer, I journeyed up to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where an Andrew fan and Dear Jack fundraiser named Lisa was organizing a beer release party at a local brewery called Mobcraft Brewing to celebrate the release of the Holiday from Real beer. This was a Dear Jack Foundation fundraising initiative to raise money for the foundation. The Mobcraft did do a portion of their sales from every beer toward Dear Jack. But I found out at that event, that Lisa is the mother of our guest today, whom, if I remember correctly, Lisa credits this guest for getting her into Andrew's music and into fundraising. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Celeste to the show, whom I eventually met on the cruise last fall. So welcome, Celeste.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you will, take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Celeste Guzzi. I am an Andrew fan of about probably 13 years now. I started listening to him when the first self-titled Wilderness album came out. So I kind of am definitely like a Wilderness guy.
Mm-hmm.
I do love all the music though.
Mm-hmm.
Disclaimer.
Sure.
Yeah, I am originally based in Milwaukee and then moved up here to St. Paul, Minnesota after college. So now I live in St. Paul. I work in early childhood education, go to a lot of shows in the cities, a lot of like other indie music or kind of like punk stuff.
That's awesome. So I knew that you had moved away from Milwaukee because your mom told me that when I met her. What was that connection with that brewery like? How do you make that happen with, because I think you were a little bit involved in that, right? At least to an extent with
Yeah,
getting that beer fundraiser going.
yeah, it was mostly a lot of email communication on my end,
Hmm.
like kind of I suppose I did like more like advisory work.
Okay.
Like I am into craft beer, but I'm not like super well versed on the process in it.
Hmm.
So I mostly kind of helped with the like fundraising aspect of it. So organizing the party and working on like the label information, stuff like that. Our team is llama lifters. So me and my mom are doing that one. Yeah, I was part of like mostly the label information and like what to credit Dear Jack with and the bio information, just like more like advisory. It was kind of a
Hmm.
bummer because I wasn't actually able to come down for the party just
Hmm.
because of work schedule. And Mobcraft isn't in business any longer. So this was like one of their last crowdfunded beers that they did, which was really special. RIP Mobcraft, but it was a really, really
Yeah.
good place and a really good concept. Yeah, and we ended up, I think, raising a little over like $700 from the sales there. That was credited towards the Raise Your Voice Challenge total.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that because I was curious. I love the initiative with Mobcraft. I love their mission of helping
Yeah.
charities. I'm so sorry to hear they closed. I loved it so much. Actually, I said to myself, if I ever get back to Milwaukee, I would literally go back to that
Yeah.
place.
Well, the good news is that they didn't actually like close. They just got
Oh,
bought out by another company. So I'm not sure if the other company is going to continue doing the crowdsource stuff and the charity stuff, but I hopefully they keep doing parts of that because it was a really cool mission, like to have a different charity represented each year. So
It definitely was. I love that. And I love the fact that you and your mother partnered on this. And it seems like you guys are pretty close, not only, personally, family wise, but also in the things that you enjoy to do. So that's really
Yeah.
cool to me.
That
Uh,
is true. We do enjoy, and like music wise, especially, I'm lucky because I actually get a lot of my music taste from my mom and my parents. Like bands like The National were actually bands introduced to me by my mom. I
mhm.
remember she asked me if I wanted to go to the show with her, and I said yes. And now they're one of my favorite bands, and like
Right on.
I went to see Muse with my parents when I was about 9 years old. So I've been going to shows with my family for a long time. My mom and I have been going to a lot of different shows since I was a kid. And then, yeah, when I started listening to Andrew, she came to the first couple of shows with me and was like, wow, this guy's amazing. And then she started listening, and then now we are where we're at. So,
Okay, so that answers my next question. I was pretty sure that was the answer. So it
yeah.
was you found Andrew first, introduced your
Yeah.
mom to Andrew. Is that right?
Yeah, and I don't really know. I know that I have like this memory of listening to Canyon Moon while we were dropping my brother off at summer camp. I
Hmm.
had my little yellow like iPod Nano, and I can like picture the album cover on there. So I think I found it through probably Cecilia, and then started listening to that album, and then finally ended up going to see him at a Summerfest show that year. He was playing after, I think Vinyl Theater was opening for him, and I was also a big Vinyl Theater fan.
Oh, I've heard of them. Are they local to that area?
They're a Milwaukee band, yeah. So,
Okay,
and they're having a comeback moment this year. So
cool.
I would say watch for some stuff from them. But yeah. So I ended up seeing them open for Andrew at Summerfest one year, and I remember I didn't quite know who Andrew was yet, but there was the moment with synesthesia with the parachute,
Hmm.
and he did that even at that show, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible.
You were
Um,
all in, huh?
yeah. So,
Yeah, that's actually came across a picture from 20, is either 2015 or 16.
well, and it's definitely like I feel like a big symbolic thing for any Andrew show. Like that moment is something that everyone looks forward to and everything. So,
For sure. I know that you're a teacher. Your mom had mentioned you're a teacher. You said you work in early childhood education. We also have friends in common in the Chicago and Milwaukee areas. Not only people I like your mother that I met while I was up there,
right.
but and I believe I met your father too, right? Like he was at the
Yes, at the party.
yeah.
He's also an Andrew fan, by the way, but just
Is
a
he
little.
okay?
Not he's a little. He's not as. It just it's just like by association.
Right, right. That's fair. We also have some friends in common from that area, like Milwaukee,
Yeah,
Chicago. Lindsay, who's been on the show a few times,
yeah,
and I think you know Caitlin as well.
yeah, yeah. I love Caitlin.
But going back to your career for a second, it's interesting. So I'm a former teacher. I was
Right.
a former school counselor, and I think we have had like 5 teachers on this show now, and I think we're at 40 some guests.
Yeah.
So let's do some quick math. About an eighth of the guests have been teachers. What is up with that?
Well, I also like I have noticed this as well. Like there's a large population of Andrew fans who are also like involved in sort of like public service, like social work
Hmm,
and teaching, stuff like that. I know a couple of like speech language pathologists that are big fans, and I don't know. I mean, definitely for me, something that's really nice about Andrew's music and working in education is that I can play all of it at work.
sure.
Like it's all very like upbeat and like hopeful and positive. A lot, especially like the wilderness stuff. That's one of the things I really like about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, my kids at school know a couple of the songs, and they'll be jamming out. Like listen to zombies all the time and stuff like that. So
Nice. So you're educating the youth and also
yeah,
educating the youth
gotta get them
on
started
music.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah,
And what you said goes along with right along with what I was going to say. It's I think good people in noble professions
yeah.
tend toward Andrew's music.
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense.
Well, and that makes sense with all of like the fan base that I've met too. Is just everyone is just so lovely and
Yeah.
welcoming, like wonderful people. So
Yep, that's what made me want to get involved in the community of Andrew
yeah,
fans. That's what made me want to start a podcast about Andrew fan music. So it all fit together. Let's talk about this song. This is a really special song to me personally, and I'm really glad you picked this one.
yeah.
I think it's a classic Andrew McMahon ballad, both lyrically and musically. I would say it's very personal to Andrew. I'm just going to guess. I'll say it right up front. This is my favorite song on the album Tilt to the Wind No More.
Mine too.
If I could, yeah, no surprise. I figured you were going to say that, but I'm glad we're in agreement. If, in fact, if I could, I'll go a step further. If I could listen to only one song on the album, if you only let me listen to one song, I'm usually going to pick this one. There's a couple others that might come into the rotation if I had to pick one, but this is probably the one I'm going to tend toward. And fun fact, just before I came upstairs to record this podcast, I was playing the song as I often do right before we record. I listened to it one last time, and my daughter was like, "Oh, I like that song," and I was like, "Cool, seal
Nice.
of approval for my teenage daughter." That's
Perfect.
that's always important. Anyway, so today we're talking about Little Disaster. The band is Andrew McMahon and the Wilderness. The song is track 7, and it was first released with the full album on March 31st, 2023, almost exactly 2 years ago from the time of this recording. I remember the rollout of this album was a bit jarring for me, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before. It was like the Zombies on Broadway rollout. There were a lot of songs released ahead of the album, so before we even got the album in our hands or in our ears, we could hear most of it somewhere. But so much so that I had to remind myself like which order I heard these songs in and when I actually heard Little Disaster for the first time, and I think I've got it narrowed down. I think out of 11 tracks on the album, I believe they released 6 songs in advance. I heard a 7th song somewhere else, like on a podcast or something that they debuted it. So there were only 4 songs that were new to me on March 31st, 2023, when the album came out, if I remember correctly. And this was one of them. But I remember, the good news is that helps me remember exactly, I don't always remember this, but I remember exactly where I was sitting when I first heard this song, first listened to the full album. So, Celeste, do you remember where you were when you first heard this one? Or what you were doing or what your thoughts were?
The first time I heard it was at the like pre-listening party, the Camp Wilderness pre-listening, and I remember, like you said, there were only a couple of songs that were new there, and I think that they, this might be wrong, but did they only do the songs that were not released yet at that listening party? I can't remember.
Wow, that is an interesting memory because I had completely forgotten that.
'Cause
I'm glad you reminded me that.
I remember hearing initially, like, I feel like they started with Submarine at the party, and but it might just be because that's what I remember because all the other songs had been released yet.
Because that was new.
Yeah, and so I listened to it at the Camp Wilderness listening party, which was really fun. I mean, it was pretty cool to like, I feel like, like exclusive like listening and stuff. But that was the first time I heard it, and then I remember when the album came out, I listened to it on the bus on my way to work.
Mm-hmm.
This is a no skips album for me for sure. So I
Mm-hmm.
like remember liking every song. I don't really remember if this one stuck out or not. I probably did, and I know like I could probably like look back in text conversations with my mom like from the
Mm-hmm.
day of us like our breakdown of the
Yeah.
new album and stuff. Yeah, I don't know, and I always kind of gravitate towards the more ballady type songs like Swim and all the kind of like ones like that. So yeah, the Camp Wilderness listening party, and then I listened to it on the bus, and it was my Little Disaster was actually my top track on Spotify last year, or the year that the album came out. Not
Was
last
it
year.
really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so that says something. Then I think, and I think all of my top tracks from that year were all from Tilt, because it was an album I listened to a lot. So
So before we started recording, I mentioned to you that I'm kind of new to Discord and I've been getting into it and trying to learn more about it.
yeah,
And one thing that my friend Tyler, who you probably know from the Discord channel, taught me was that you can import your Spotify history so that Last.fm is, via Discord is reflective of your actual listening
right.
habits years back if you want to do that work. And most people don't want to do that work, but I'm kind of nerdy about my my music listening and wanting to
Yeah,
track that. I do remember when I ran a top tracks of Andrew Man in the Wilderness, I'm sure Little Disaster was up there.
yeah.
I don't remember where it was, of course, but it's fun to look at that and like look at my listening habits and what I was listening to at a certain time. That's been another interesting thing. What else I was listening to in March of 2023, like I can
Right,
go
right.
back and look at that too.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think the cruise had like just been announced.
Yeah, officially they announced it at last 2 years ago, Dear Jack.
Yeah, I remember that.
So it would have been like New Friends Tour, I
Oh,
think.
yes.
That's what it,
There
yeah.
we go. That's
Yeah,
what I
yeah, that's what you're associating with, which makes sense. So you unlocked a hidden memory for me because I was gonna say the first time I heard this song was sitting by a pool at my parents' house in Florida. We had started vacationing down there like the night before it came out, and then I started playing the album by the pool the next day, and I remember hearing New Friends, and I remember hearing Little Disaster and Submarine and the other songs that were quote unquote new to me. But apparently I heard it before then. I don't remember when that listening party was, but I know I was there. It's funny when you start talking to other fans and it's like, oh, you were there too. Oh, like
Yeah,
all those years ago. So
I know. Yeah, lots more. We've probably been to a lot of the same shows that we don't even know about.
right, we've definitely crossed paths.
Yeah.
So, in fact, I'll just throw it out there. Were you at the Chicago Dear Jack benefit in 2022 then?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I was at that show too with my
And
family.
that was a special one too because that was our first. That was actually the moment that we decided to form a team and start fundraising because we
Oh,
just
wow.
we were lucky enough like oh Andrew's coming to Chicago, we're based in Milwaukee, Minnesota, so like if there's any shows ever in like the Twin Cities, Milwaukee or Chicago or
Hmm.
Madison, go like pretty much whenever wherever it is. We didn't like really know what to expect or anything. Like we knew about Dear Jack and
Hmm.
like had like donated and watched all the like content from it and were following the accounts, but we weren't involved until that point when we actually saw people come out and talk and
Hmm.
like watched all the testimonials. And I know me and my mom both obviously like have really personal connections with cancer, like I think a lot of us do, and so it was really emotional for us to just like watch that. And then we decided that moment like okay, this is what we're gonna do now, we're gonna do this for next year. That's where Llama Lifters was born at that show.
That's so cool. And I
Yeah.
was in the room, but I
Yeah.
didn't know you guys at the time. I think I started fundraising the following year, 2023, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I believe so. Same year. Yeah, that's awesome. I joined. You may have heard of Diane or Team October.
Yes. Yeah.
I joined her team.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I started to form. That's one of the reasons I started to form connections with those Chicago folks. So
Yeah. It's nice to have like we have this like little Midwest squad, I feel like.
we do. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit of production notes here. So I found a couple of quotes, and I think I sent you some of them
Mhm.
from an American Songwriter review of Tilt to the Wind No More from March 2023. This writer stated, "Some tracks roar to be noticed, others whisper to be heard, like the light, wispy Little Disaster and the distant Built to Last." Now, hard to disagree with that one sentence review of the song. I feel like the reviewer's not really giving it the credit it deserves, and probably not anywhere near what we think of this song.
Yeah. That's funny because I was gonna say the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think I understand where the person was coming from
Yeah.
because it's a pop heavy album. It's a
Yeah.
production heavy album, and Little Disaster doesn't pop the same way. Maybe I don't know. That's just my. Do you have any thoughts on that? That's just my speculation.
Well, I have two answers. I have like a more like fan answer, but then I also have like kind of a music nerdy answer. Because I am like a musician, but
Oh,
I think that Little Disaster is interesting because there's not a lot of pop songs that are in triple meter, so it's in like 3/4 or 6/8. So I think that automatically those songs kind of get put in the lullaby category because that's like mostly what they're used to.
interesting.
But I don't feel like the song is whispery at all. I feel like you said, it's a ballad,
Hmm.
and I definitely feel like it's more, like obviously it's a pop heavy album, but I still think that it's got, moments where I'm like, this is like loud and feels important.
Yeah, the chorus is pretty singable, and which we'll
Right.
definitely talk more about the lyrics and everything. But it's pretty singable, and it gets louder, and it gets like kind of majestic, even if you will.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that one's hard for me to believe. I don't know. Maybe that person listened to it once and didn't really
Yeah.
give it the time
The
with it.
intro, I like understand. I'm like, okay,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, like in the outro, like they kind of match,
yeah.
and they yeah.
I was thinking about the 3/4 thing though, because of like a lot of his other like ballad type songs are also in triple meter, which I thought
Hmm.
was interesting. Like Swim, obviously, and This Wild Ride, like a lot of more of the like I feel like a lot of the sensitive songs, and that might be
Hmm.
something that Andrew as a musician is like doing on purpose and like speaking on.
Sure.
Yeah, just interesting to me.
What instrument do you play?
I was a cellist for a long time, almost like 12 years.
Right on.
I'm planning on picking it up again soon. It's been a while, but I really miss playing. So
When Andrew McMahon was rolling out Tilt to the Wind No More, when his management was rolling it out, I really like that they did these social media posts, and they did these social media posts, one for each song, where he just kind of put out a statement what each song was about. So really good for the research of this podcast, but also great for a fan in general that we
Yeah,
get these nuggets of information. We didn't get that with most albums, right? You can't go back to
right.
Glass Passenger and look at a write-up of what each song is about. It'd be nice, but he did that with this album, and I hope he does it in the future. So
Yeah.
this is a blip from that. They also put them all together in a Consequence of Sound article at the same time in March 2023. So I'm going to read how Andrew described the track came together. He said, "Seeing that old apartment left me nostalgic for those reckless days. In years past, I probably would have just headed to the bar and tried to reclaim them. But this time, I sat down at the piano and wrote instead. When I'd made my way to the heart of the song, I called my friend Jeremy Hatcher, and we cut the demo and finished writing it together in the studio. When I played the demo for my producer, Tommy English, a week or two into the recording of the album, he asked who I had worked with on it. The next day, Jeremy came to the studio and ended up producing the whole album with Tommy and me." Now, these are my favorite types of stories that Andrew tells. It's one of the things I love about Camp Wilderness. It's one of the things I love about listening to him talk in interviews, and even if it's just, the written word. I just love hearing how a song comes together.
Yeah.
Are you the type that you want to know all the ins and outs of how the song comes together, how it was created, what it's about? Or are you more of the type of person who isn't too worried about the artist's interpretation or inner meaning, and you just kind of want to make your own out of it? And where do you fall on that spectrum, if there is one?
Yeah, I feel like definitely a little bit of both. Like I obviously, you want to respect the artist, and like with someone like Andrew, where it's like, all of us have this really like close personal connection with him and his music. Like I want to, respect what he is thinking about and what everything is about. And so I think that I do I would say that probably like for my first instinct, I like to like interpret it on my own.
Hmm.
But then I do enjoy like hearing the perspective and like where, he was at with the writing and everything. And obviously the lyrics are really reflective of that story.
For sure. Especially when we get to those verses specifically.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much the same. I like to come to the song, try to make my own meaning of it. And sometimes when I hear from the artist and what they have to say about it, or I read these quotes, especially on this podcast, it could change the meaning of the song for me.
Right.
And I do worry about that. It's like, well, I had this,
Yeah.
notion of what it was about, what it meant to me. And I know artists worry about that too, because I've heard
Right.
Andrew and others talk about that. It's like, well, it's really more of their, once I put it out into the world, it's theirs as a fan, right?
Yeah.
But on the same note, it's my curiosity. I'm like, I want to know what he meant, though,
Yeah.
what he, how it came together, and not just lyrically, but like how the whole thing came together. So
Right.
it's kind of cool hearing, how he started with one friend and then he went to another friend and then all three friends came together and basically made a song. So
Yeah.
that in general is a cool concept.
Yeah, well, I mean, he is a storyteller, like primarily I feel like that he excels like in that kind of lyric writing. I feel like personally I always am closer to lyrics than music, and that so it's like lyrics first and then music second.
Hmm.
So I feel like, and especially on Tilt, and with a lot of like the stuff, I mean, obviously everything in Transit is a whole like story album, and
Yeah.
but I feel like Tilt especially has a lot of songs that are very like narrative, and like you can kind of see, I guess, where he was at with writing them. And so a lot of when you hear the background of it, a lot of it, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense when after
Yeah.
you listen to the lyrics. But yeah, I think it's interesting to hear, and especially like we talked about, like this is a production heavy album, so it's interesting to see like who the different like influences are, because I feel like musicians, each producer has kind of a distinctive style.
Hmm.
And I don't know a lot about music production, but I have a lot of admiration for it, and like appreciation, especially for within like pop music. And I like that kind of like electronic stuff, and I like good mixes and everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I guess it's just a different experience for me from like live. I like to take it sort of face value, and
Hmm.
then live performances are something different. So
Hmm.
like I guess what I'm getting at there is like I don't feel offended when the song is different live than on the album, because it's your unique experience. I like that.
That used to bother me in my younger years.
Yeah,
Initially turned me off of live albums, like when I was growing up in high school and college, and I was really into
yeah,
music, and I would get the live out. People were like, you gotta check out the live. If you like this artist, you gotta check out the live album. And I'd be like, no, I don't like that because it doesn't sound like the album. And
yeah.
well, it's not supposed to, right?
Right. I remember I listened to when I was like a teenager, I was listening to my first alternative, I guess, indie band, not indie, but alternative was Coldplay.
Hmm.
I was really big into Coldplay, and I they have a live album. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called Left, Right, Left, Right, Left with the butterfly on the cover.
Okay.
And I remember listening to that album and like having to be like, oh, I can't sing along to this. I don't know
Hmm.
like how, and that used to be really important to me. But now, I don't know. Now I have like such an appreciation for live albums, especially with bands that I've seen live, because then I'm like, oh, this is recreating like this memory for me
Hmm.
of this live concert. And so it's not so much as like, I guess for me, a live album is more of an active listening experience than like a
Hmm.
passive one. Like I like to like put it on to actually listen to it and rather have it as like background noise.
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, I haven't really thought about it that way. I do know that it's especially fascinating to hear a live recording or obviously see a live video from a performance I was at, because it's like interesting to see someone through someone else's eyes what that
Yeah,
looked like,
yeah, for sure.
but also just kind of I don't remember. I've talked about this on the show before. I don't remember every moment of a live experience. I don't know if some people do. I feel like I have an especially bad memory for it. So, like, I
Yeah,
remember how it felt. I remember that he played about 20 songs and that I liked them all and that I remember a
yeah,
couple standout moments, but, like, I don't remember every detail.
yeah,
And I'm definitely going to come back to that point when we talk live music, by the way. But it's neat to go back and watch that and be like, oh my gosh, that did happen. That's what that looked like. That's what that
yeah.
sounded like.
And especially when you're trying to like quote stuff on it and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I got that right.
Yeah, right. Well, talking about the recording, it was recorded sometime in 2022. We don't have any specific information on who played what on each track, but I'm going to guess Andrew played keyboards and piano on this track. But
It's a good guess.
yeah, yeah, it's a pretty good guess, right? And then I assume because Tommy English and Jeremy Hatcher both listed as songwriters and
Mhm.
producers that they probably played the other instruments. But unlike some of the Andrew McMahon albums, it doesn't specifically list out instrumentalists on each track. So that's why I think more like the first Wilderness album, it was basically the producers that just played the music for the most part, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense timeline wise too. Like I guess a lot of the other, and like the other band members are off doing other stuff too. So
Hmm. Well, I've mentioned these guys before, but Tommy English, people may remember that name from he produced some songs on Zombies on Broadway. It makes perfect sense
yeah,
why these are some of your top tier albums here, because
yeah,
there are similar in some ways, but there's also not only a stylistic but production
yeah.
level
I
that
love
is
zombies
similar.
too.
Yeah,
So
I can
that's my
tell.
yeah, definitely my second favorite after Tilt. So
Okay. And then people may remember Jeremy Hatcher as someone who's actually produced for some pretty big time pop musicians at this point. He's also married to Morgan Paris, who was the multi instrumentalist, violinist, keyboardist, and all that in the 2020 2021 era of Andrew McMahon and the Wilderness Tour.
oh,
So
that's cool. I didn't know that.
yeah, they got married like a year or two ago, and now she tours with an artist named Ash, a female artist named Ash, and Shawn Mendes was her latest tour. So
So was she the one on the that was at the drive-in tours?
that's her. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
Cool.
2020 drive-in,
That's
and
another show that we were probably both at.
you know what? I wasn't at any of the drive-in
Oh, okay.
shows.
I was gonna say because
Yeah,
that one was in Illinois, so like,
Chicago is about a 6-hour drive, so it's
oh
rare
god,
I get up there.
never mind. I know
Yeah,
that's
but
crazy.
we basically have to be able to justify it by doing some other things while we're there. So when
Right.
we came up for the Dear Jack benefit in 2022, we were like, we're gonna make a long weekend of it, and we did like a
Yeah,
family trip out of it.
Chicago's fun. So
Yeah, it is fun. I want to get back there in the warmer months.
yeah.
Let's talk live history, by the way.
Okay.
Do you remember seeing this song performed, Little Disaster performed on the cruise in November? Do you remember
Yeah.
in the set?
I remember that one for sure. I know the Wilderness set was definitely the one that I was most looking forward to
Hmm.
because like I said, like I love all of the music. I love Something Corporate and I love Jack's Mannequin, but I felt like with the Something Corporate revival, like the Wilderness was like kind of put on hold, and I was like, oh man, I really miss hearing all these Wilderness songs live. And I was really, really hoping for Little Disaster because I know that there's kind of a rotation between some of the newer songs, and that's like one of the ones where it's like, oh, it could be this, but it could be Submarine, or it could be New Friends, or whatever.
Hmm.
And so I was really excited, and I know that's what Lindsay actually came up to me after the show, and she was like, "I was thinking about you,"
Oh
and
yeah. Oh, she knew that it was one of your
yeah.
favorites.
And
Okay.
that was also her. A Little Disaster was her top song of the year that Tilt came out too. So
Yeah.
we bonded over that. I remember, yeah, and we were on the floor,
Hmm.
like the pool deck, and like my mom knows how special the song is to me, and so she was really excited for me. Yeah, yeah, that was a great set.
It was.
Couple
For
other
sure.
songs that I had really missed hearing live, like Island Radio.
Oh
Um,
yeah, because he
I
used to
had
play
missed,
that one all the time.
yeah, I missed it so bad, and then so I was really excited.
And I figured he had to play that one out in the middle of the
Oh yeah,
ocean. You know,
of
you got to
course.
play Island Radio.
I know. I was like, okay, there's a couple of like boat themed
Yeah.
songs that they're definitely going to be on there and stuff. But yeah, I mean, that whole experience was just incredible. I know we talk about it all the time. Like, oh man, I literally like, I think I said, I'm pretty sure that that was probably the most fun I've ever had in my entire life.
I saw that comment of yours on Discord, and I'm right there with you. Like
Yeah,
it is one of my top tier moments and weeks. What a sense of community
I
to be
know.
among all those like-minded people.
Right.
So it's not just mute live music, and that's why I say, and I'm sitting here anticipating like all of us are like, when are they going to make that announcement for pre-booking
I
and the next
know.
lineup? But
Yeah.
truthfully, the lineup doesn't matter to me.
No,
If
I'm going
Andrew
no matter
McMahon's
what.
hosting and his bands are playing, I'll be there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I mean that especially like it was election week,
mhm.
the week that we went, and so I was in a really dark place.
Yeah, a lot of us were.
I know, well, and like I'm trans, I think you know that, but
Hmm.
like, and so I was like, oh God, like really having a lot of emotions about that, and I know that growing up, like Andrew has a giant trans flag sticker in the middle of his piano, and like, so I knew I was like, okay, this is my favorite artist who also I know supports me.
Hmm.
And then there was that moment when he played Last Straw when everyone was just screaming. And I was like, okay, this is where I need to be right now. And it just made everything feel like it was going to be okay.
That's
So,
amazing. It's amazing what the power of music can do. Live
and
music, but how an artist can make us feel safe
yeah,
and okay in
and just
such a
the
dark
community
place.
that he's brought together, like, is just like fabulous.
Yeah, it was a pretty special experience, and I'm looking forward to that in 2026
Yes,
again.
for sure.
I on a funny note, on a light note,
Yeah.
I don't remember Little Disaster being played. Like I Googled or I YouTubed it, and I was like, oh, it was played that night.
Yeah.
It's one of my very favorite Wilderness songs, so it's just
Yeah.
ridiculous to me. I don't know. There was so much live music that week,
Yeah.
and
And a fair amount of alcohol too.
and a
So,
fair amount of alcohol,
yeah.
to be fair. Yeah, yeah. So and it's just long days, late
Yeah.
nights. It was a lot of fun. But I found the same thing when I go on another music cruise we go on.
Oh, yeah. Because you go on the rock boat a lot, right?
Yeah, by the end
Yeah.
of the week, it's like, who did I see the first night? Like, what
Right.
happened? Like, there is just so much. It's just
Yeah.
over stimulation, I
Yeah.
guess. And I guess that's what I attribute it to. But I remember what I felt like at the Wilderness set. I was down on the pool deck as well. We were right at the kind of the front of the parachute where the parachute was
Mhm.
being, I think, right in front of the people right in front of me were holding it. It might have been my first time under the parachute, to be
Oh,
honest.
nice.
Yeah, so I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever been under it.
It's a cool experience. Yeah, I've only been under it once
Yeah.
at a different show, but yeah.
Again, going back to the fact that some people record the videos, that's awesome for me because I was
Hmm.
able to go back and relive it now. So even
Yeah,
though I didn't remember, I was able to go on YouTube and be like, that's what that looked like. That's what that sounded like. And it brought it back to me. So
yeah,
obviously I now remember. But
yeah.
if you were to just point blank ask me a month ago, did they play Little Disaster on the cruise? I don't think
I
so.
don't know. And used to be different. Like when I was a teenager, I took a lot of photo and video at shows, but
Hmm.
now I really don't take that much.
Hmm.
Like I'll only take video if something like really cool is happening.
Yeah.
And like I took a couple, obviously. Like I think I filmed
Yeah.
his cover of The Distance
Oh
and like
yeah.
stuff like
Yeah, I
that.
got a clip of that.
Yeah,
That was incredible.
I know that's awesome.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so it's nice to see other live videos because I don't really film ever.
Yeah.
And so like we'll be like seeking out, like full concert videos and stuff. There was a really good one of the Jack's Mannequin set from the cruise too.
Oh yeah, I caught that one.
Yeah. Yeah, which is nice because yeah, like I said, I don't film very much, so like
Yeah.
to be able to go relive it.
I usually do one song, one full song horizontally, and
Yeah.
I put it on YouTube, and then I do like anywhere from 1 to 5 vertical clips of 1 minute
Yeah.
each throughout for Instagram stories.
Yeah.
But I only do one song, and I kind of pick it randomly. I kind of like start recording before they even start playing.
Yeah.
Usually and I'm just like, okay, whatever they play, that's the one I'm
Yep, that's
getting
the one.
tonight.
I don't my mom runs the Instagram account, so
Hmm.
she films a little bit more usually for
Yeah.
just yeah, or like a lot of times I'll do like if I know that a lyric I really like is coming up,
Hmm.
I'll do that. And so
It's nice to have at least short clips just to kind of know, or even if it's someone else that took the video, just to kind of know what it sounded like is kind of neat to go back and,
yeah.
get
I
that
know I have a
memory.
couple of clips from a concert in January. I went to see Jukebox the Ghost when they did their 3 night, 3 album shows
Ooh,
in
nice.
Minneapolis. So I
Big
did all
fan.
3 of those. Yeah. And well, I'm new fan from the cruise, so
Oh, very cool. Oh, I love
yes,
that.
so
I'm sure they'd
I
love to
know,
hear
and I
that
was like,
too.
how have I not seen these guys before? But so I was really lucky that I ended up getting to see them when I actually knew some of their songs.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I have a couple of clips from that show that I'll like go back to if I'm feeling down, like
yeah.
just because it was so fun. So
Did you see them on the pool deck or the theater or in the atrium?
I think I just caught a little bit of the set in the atrium, and then we
Okay.
heard a little bit of the pool deck set from our room
Oh,
because
really? You could hear it.
yeah, well, they scheduled them so late
It
that
was
we were
late.
like, we're wiped. We were gonna
Yeah,
go, and then we were wiped, and so,
yeah.
but we had a balcony room, and we could actually hear them from
Oh,
the
sweet.
balcony.
My wife's not a late night person. I am. So I
Oh,
was all like, "Oh, late night show, I got to be there." And she was like, and she's a jukebox fan, and she was like,
yeah,
I guess I have to go." And
yeah,
she went.
trudge along, yeah,
I was proud of her.
yeah,
But the atrium show is pretty special because
yeah,
it
they're
felt more
fun guys.
intimate. I was fortunate to have him on the podcast back in October, right before the
Yeah, I remember
cruise.
that.
There's such a good group of dudes, and it
They're
makes you
so
want to
fun.
support
Yeah,
them. Kind of like Andrew, makes you just want to go out and support them. So
yeah, that's another community that I really like felt at home with there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really glad you got a chance to see their full set in was it in Minnesota then?
Yeah, they did in Minneapolis at Fine Line here, which is like a club venue.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really fun.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to see them back on the cruise, but honestly, I could say the same for just about every artist that I saw last time.
Yeah,
So
I loved everyone. So
yeah, yeah.
and I do hope I mean, there's definitely some that I'm pulling for, but it would be cool to like one of the things I liked was like seeing new bands, like
Mhm.
the only band that I'd seen before was Mr. Rives. So it was fun to see some other ones.
I agree. I agree. I think it'll be good to have some new ones on the boat too. So
Yeah.
the song "Little Disaster," it's only been played. So we've talked about our experience seeing it live. It's only been played 20 times total. But I'm going to go back to what you said earlier, Celeste, that Tilt the Wind No More came out in 2023, but then the year after we got something corporate, and now it's Jack's
Right.
Mannequin. So it's kind of like Andrew Van in the Wilderness is, I wouldn't call it a hiatus. I don't think that would be a fair assessment, but it's like kind of,
Like a merger, I feel like.
I don't know what to call it, right?
Yeah.
So it hasn't had a whole lot of time in the limelight. Like those tracks haven't had a whole lot of time in the limelight. So I was glad that they were able to be played on those tours. But yeah, not a surprise that it hasn't been played very often. Obviously, Little Disaster will not be played this year on tour with Jack's Mannequin for the
Yeah.
obvious reasons.
Except for maybe Red Rocks.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I take that back. So yeah, Red Rocks is going
But
to be a
I
whole
don't know.
different thing.
That's gonna be a crazy time, I feel like.
Yeah, it's going to be, my understanding is a rotation between the three
Yeah.
bands and different songs. Kind of like a
I think you said more pen and piano style.
Okay, I was gonna
Like any of
say
those
maybe more
shows.
like the Andrew and Friends set on the cruise. I
Yeah,
don't
that
know.
was really fun too. So that would be awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine that. Were you by chance at the Indianapolis Late Show after Wonder Road
Mm-mm.
last year, or was it last year? I don't know. I
No.
like you, I'm getting the years mixed up. Okay,
Yeah.
so Andrew did an all piano set,
Oh, cool.
yeah, in Indianapolis. I guess it was 2 summers ago. He did play Little Disaster on piano. It was kind of like a storyteller's set.
Yeah.
And Marcy and I, my wife and I, were right up. There wasn't even a barricade. We were just right up by the stage by his piano, and it was incredible. And I do remember that. I do remember because that
Yeah.
was pretty. I remember thinking this. I love this song. And we did get a clip of like I got like a clip, so I will put that on Instagram as a reel or something because I did. I looked in my files the other day, and I don't go back and look at concert videos a whole lot, but sometimes I do. And in
Yeah.
this case, I actually found like a minute. Again, I took a minute of Little Disaster. I was really proud of myself. I was like, oh, I actually captured one that I'm referring to in the show.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we talked about Camp Wilderness. He also played it on piano in May 2024 on Camp Wilderness. So anybody who's a member can go back and actually see that in the video. If you click on Video Vault, you can actually see it. It's the very first song he played that night, and that was special too. I love when he, gets on a piano on Camp Wilderness and
Yeah,
plays for us.
it is great.
So let's talk the Jack's Mannequin tour for a minute.
Yeah.
Are you going to be going to any of the dates? It sounds like because they are coming your way. I know.
Yes, yeah, I get a show, and the venue that they're playing in St. Paul is actually like just only about a mile from my house. So that's
Wow,
nice.
lucky you.
I know. I live just right outside of downtown St. Paul, so
Uh-huh.
that's pretty awesome. Yeah, so we're doing, and when I say we, I mean me and my mom at all of
Hmm.
them, and then my dad is coming to a couple of the shows as well.
Cool.
But so we're doing Summerfest, and that'll be fun. That's actually my first Summerfest show since 2019 was the last time I went. I saw
Wow.
Death Cab for Cutie and the Killers,
Ooh,
2019.
that would be amazing.
Oh, it was awesome. It was
Yeah.
a great show. That'll be my first Summerfest show. So, and that's like a very nostalgic thing for me because I did a lot of Summerfest as a teenager.
Uh-huh.
And my first Andrew show was at Summerfest. So that's exciting. So we're doing that. That's the 19th of June. Then we're driving to Chicago for the Chicago show
Ooh,
after
you're
that.
hitting all three, huh?
Yep. And then the next morning we'll go to back up to St. Paul. So my dad is coming to Summerfest and Chicago. And Chicago's nice because my brother lives there, and so like we get to see my brother then when we go down there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so back to back to back, which
Yeah.
is a little crazy, but it'll be fun.
So ironically, I did get a Chicago ticket. And then before, and then it was before Summerfest was announced, but we were kind of speculating. So I was like,
Right.
well, if it works out, I could go to both. But my daughter has a marching band event that weekend, and it's two different events, actually, technically,
Cool.
Friday and Saturday. So it just, I just can't miss it.
Yeah. That's marching band too. Side note, yeah, I have so much respect for that.
My daughter is all in on it, and hopefully my younger one will be too. And
Yeah,
I'm
it's
really
good stuff.
proud of that. So I definitely want to be here to support their events.
Awesome.
And I'll see Jack's Mannequin elsewhere,
Yeah.
but that it would have been very convenient to see them twice in 2 nights, an hour
Right.
apart. So,
Yeah.
but it just didn't work out this time.
Yeah, we're lucky to have like the space in that area where it's not a crazy drive from
Hmm.
Milwaukee to Chicago. The one from Milwaukee to St. Paul is a little longer, but it's still
Oh, I
pretty
bet.
manageable. Yeah, so we're doing those three and then taking a break. Oh, and we're doing Red Rocks, obviously. I
Yeah.
mentioned already. So, but that one is fun because we made a whole vacation out of it. Like, and I'm really excited to do the Dear Jack events with that because it's right near Dear Jack headquarters.
Hmm.
So we talked to Susan from the Dear Jack Foundation, like, hey, are you guys doing anything? And she was like, yeah, we're gonna plan some fun stuff. So I know that we're gonna go to the Rockies game that they're doing stuff with.
Yeah.
So we'll do a whole vacation down there, and then we're also going to Detroit in the fall.
Oh, you okay? So I will see you in Detroit. I'm going to
Yes.
Detroit.
Yeah, and I've never been to Detroit, so I'm excited about that. I've never been to Colorado either, so
Okay. Well,
yeah.
I've never been to Colorado either, but I'm from Detroit. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah, I will usually try to catch the Detroit show. So it worked out really well that it happens to be on
Awesome.
11/11, and I get to go to a show on 11/11 because it
Yeah,
happens to be in my hometown. So,
perfect.
yeah, yeah,
And I always look forward to the 11/11 show each year.
yeah. I don't usually get to go to that one, but if it's Midwest, I will try to get there.
I know we've been spoiled the past couple of years.
Yeah, really,
Midwest states.
really, we have.
I'm excited. I am a huge like Glass Passenger fan,
Hmm.
and so I'm excited to be able to see more of those shows because I have seen like with the drive-in shows they did all of everything in transit, which is great. But I was excited on the cruise too to hear more kind of from the Glass Passenger era.
A mix of all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually I don't know if you listened to his Andrew's interview on the broadcast Michiganders podcast yet.
I did.
Yeah, but he talked about like doing a lot of they're rehearsing a lot of deep cuts, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, like what are we gonna get?
He gave some crazy number of songs that they're trying to
It's like
learn.
80 or something. Yeah,
Yeah, that was insane.
yeah,
Yeah, that was a great interview. I highly recommend if anybody listening has not checked it out.
yeah,
Breaker Box is the name of Michigander's
yeah,
podcast, Jason's podcast, and he did a really great job. And it's basically listening to two friends hang out.
yeah.
They're obviously really close. So,
And I love Jason Michigander.
mhm.
His music is also like amazing. If you didn't get a chance to see him on New Friends, but
I
yeah,
I
he's
did, and I because of that episode, I listened to his album recently for the first time, and I'm glad I
so
did.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love it.
yeah, I'll listen to it more too.
Yeah,
Highly recommend.
yeah.
All right, let's talk about some songwriting with Little Disaster. When I listen to the lyrics of the song, for some reason, and I get this way sometimes, it's just this weird perspective I have. I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that Andrew had a co-writer on this one because this one sounds so personal, and I think we've alluded to this, but it just feels like it came from him. So it always makes me curious, all right? Like I always want to like dig into it, like, well, which parts did he write? Which parts did other people write? But I guess it doesn't really matter. It's an Andrew McMahon song. He's one of the writers on it. He probably primarily wrote the lyrics. I don't know. But I guess it just always surprises me when they're especially personal with lyrics about his life that there's co-writers. But Tommy English and Jeremy Hatcher mentioned earlier, they're listed as the co-writers. I'm gonna quote the same Consequence of Sound article I quoted earlier when we were talking production. I'm gonna read the rest of that quote from that Consequence of Sound article. He states, "The words for the song were born of a traffic jam that stranded me in front of an old apartment that I lived in with the Jack's Mannequin band in 2005. I was flooded with all these memories of my 20s, terrorizing the neighborhood bars and grinding in the studio and rehearsal space to launch that project. That time was so frenetic and wonderful, but I was a total mess and eventually ended up fighting for my life after being diagnosed with leukemia." It sounds like in being a disaster, he was referring to his time in his 20s, I assume. Is that kind of what you gathered?
Yeah, especially when he's talking about, like the old days, like chaos and crime as a big theme.
Yeah, so he continues in the quote, and this is where it kind of overlaps with the quote I gave earlier. "In the years following my recovery from cancer, I had a lot of trouble reconciling what I lost, the fearlessness and freedom from the reminders of my own mortality. I didn't handle it well, and it led to a lot of self-sabotage and additional trauma. The beauty of this moment in my life is how much of it I've lived on the other side of those hard years. And still seeing that old apartment left me nostalgic for those reckless days." That part of it kind of leads into the quote I read earlier. Any thoughts on anything he's saying there?
I don't know. I guess for me, to hear like his interpretation of it is really nice because it is very similar to my own,
Hmm.
or like my own experience with it, I suppose. Yeah, like I felt like, and I really needed this album like at the time that it came out because I felt like I was kind of stagnating and I was like not really sure what I was going to be doing. And I know like I'm still young, but I just a new adult and like trying to figure out like what I'm doing with my life. And I remember the time that the song actually hit me the hardest was like probably not until maybe like a few months after the album came out. But
Hmm.
I was listening to the song on my way to the gym and I started crying in the car because I was stuck in a relationship that I wasn't really happy in and like I didn't know where it was going, like career goals, and I it was just kind of felt like kind of lost and like trying to do too much at one time. And I actually have a tattoo of this song. I don't know if you know.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'll show you here on like so you can see on the camera. But so I have my big
Oh, that's incredible. Wow,
yeah,
it's the
so the
artwork.
backdrop. So the artwork is obviously the backdrop from the New Friend store, also like the Nobody Tells You When You're Young album art. And then he wrote out for me so hard catching your breath if you never slow down, because that was the lyric that really hit me.
So that's what it says on your arm?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I just realized I was trying to do too much at one time and I was like just needed a minute to take a breath.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of what this song has always meant for me, is just like slow down and appreciate things just how they are. It's nice to hear him say that as well because that's exactly how I feel.
It's incredible. It's just like magical when the right song hits you at the right time in your life when you need it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what happened with this one.
Mhm.
I love that tattoo. So,
Thank you.
do you mind if I share it on Instagram? Is that
Yeah,
cool?
that's fine.
Yeah, I love that. I love that artwork. All of the artwork for the tour and the singles and the visual videos they put on YouTube,
Mhm.
and then Tilted Wind No More, the album itself. I love all that artwork. It's colorful. It's very radiant. I like it a lot.
I know I was debating between this one and then the like outline of the hands from the actual album cover,
Hmm.
but I was glad that I went with this one because obviously like Nobody Tells You When You're Young too is hits hard like lyrically. So
Definitely does. That's a great lyrical track there. Great track, but
yes.
lyrically, it's amazing. Yeah, similar to this one.
Mhm.
That's one I'd put up there near the top of this album too. By the way.
Yeah. It grew on me over time. I used to not appreciate it as much,
Hmm.
but then like when he opened with it on
Oh
New
yeah.
Friends, I was like, okay, this is cool. Like,
It was interesting. If you would have told me before that, I think I've mentioned the show before, but If you would have told me before that tour that he was going to open with that song, I'd have been like, "What? That's not going to
Crazy.
work."
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
right?
how does that work?
Right.
But it worked.
Yeah.
We've talked about this subject a little bit. Is this the sound of a song? Is this the type of song you'd want to hear from Andrew McMahon then? Is this, when he's releasing new music, is this the kind of sound you're looking for?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to be like polarizing. I definitely prefer like poppy or kind of type music in general,
Hmm.
just with like everything that I listen to. And so I love the tracks that are like piano with like electronic stuff,
Hmm.
which I feel is that one, this one. And that's also one thing that makes it so interesting when it's live too, is because it's a different arrangement, obviously because he's with the band.
It certainly is.
I don't know. I'm really interested to see where, like, what he does next. I know it's funny because I know a couple of years ago, like after New Friends, he was like, "Okay, I'm not going to tour for a while," and now he's doing two more. He's done two more major tours. Like, I'm like, okay, dude. Like, what do you mean?
I don't know where and if he's finding time to write new Andrew Band in the Wilderness songs because he's
Right.
just so busy.
Yeah,
But to be fair, when he said that, he said, "This is the last time we're going to do this for a while."
that's
And I remember,
true.
I remember hearing that and being like, "So wait, you're going to do something
Okay.
else now?"
He does love to drop like little hints, I feel
Yeah.
like secrets. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love it all, but I definitely, the Wilderness has a special place for me just because that's where I started. And then Tilt is my favorite album out of all of his projects. So I definitely like the kind of poppier, like more produced stuff.
Hmm.
But that's just my own personal taste. Obviously,
Yeah.
I get into something corporate mood, sometimes I gotta play it. I listen
Yeah.
to North, and stuff.
Which
So
is very, yeah, it's very different, but
yeah.
it's just there's this common thread as we all know as fans that of Andrew's songwriting, and that's one thing that I love about this song is that I feel like it could have been musically,
Yeah.
production aside, musically it could have been a something corporate ballad, and it could
Yeah.
have been a Jack's Mannequin song.
I think lyrically too, like especially like a lot of the more like storytelling, like something corporate songs,
Hmm.
like a little more angsty maybe.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. But that's what I find interesting about this song. And I think that's why I love it so much is that it's kind of the one of the universal Andrew tracks that could be
Yeah.
just anywhere in his catalog.
And it is interesting to talk about the production of this album and that a lot of it overlaps with Zombies because there are Submarine is the one, right, that was supposed to be on Zombies and then just didn't make it.
Yep,
But there are a couple songs like that one and this song I'm like, okay, this would fit in really well on that album too.
it would.
So that's yeah, interesting to see like the different producer styles and work there.
Yeah, and speaking of the sound of it, it's very atmospheric. Like you get that we talked about that beginning and ending earlier and how it kind of flows in and then it flows out. It's very atmospheric, but that atmospheric sound kind of carries through the song even when the instrumentation comes
Yeah.
in. I know he's done that on other tracks. It's not unique to this one, but I do appreciate that about this track. It's something I kind of picked out.
That's a good descriptor too, because that I once you said that word, I'm like, okay, yeah, atmospheric. That's generally like the kind of thing that I gravitate towards.
Okay. And then yeah, when the piano comes in the opening, you definitely start to hear those different production elements in the song, which I think is something it sounds like you appreciate a lot.
Yeah, I love the little like higher pitch backing vocals that they have in this one.
I had backing vocals in my notes too. I
Yeah,
definitely yeah, I it does something extra, doesn't it,
yeah.
in this song?
Well, and I don't know, you might know this, but because I can't. Sometimes I have a hard time telling it if it's him singing and it's just edited or if it's someone else. But I feel like this one sounds like him.
I think it is his vocals
Yeah.
layered. I'm not sure, of course, but I think it is.
I like how it sounds. Like that sounds like silly, but it's true.
No, no, I do too. I hear you.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that makes it for me for sure.
Hmm. And the verses are more talk singing, but then as we pointed out earlier, then the chorus kind of becomes like this anthemic, very singable
Hmm.
thing. So it's two different things. It's pretty dynamic between the verses and the chorus, and I really like how he belts out that chorus and that change up when he gets there.
Yeah.
Makes it more impactful to me.
Hmm.
So I ask this question sometimes, but how would you describe the mood of the song? Because I think this can go a couple different ways depending on your perspective.
Knowing the background from it, like I feel like it's meant to be like very nostalgic, right?
Hmm.
I don't know. For me, it like obviously is like very anthemic, and it's like kind of. I'm gonna steal a quote from Tommy Siegel of Jukebox the Ghost. where he said that some songs are like musical Xanax for him, where
Uh-huh.
like he just listens to them and he's like, okay, I'm going to be okay. And that's kind of how this song feels to me, especially just because it was so like at like such an important time in my life. And so
Hmm.
it just feels very like hopeful isn't quite the right term, but
Calming.
yeah, or like settling, feeling like you are taking a breather, you know.
Hmm.
Meditative, perhaps. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Well, you had a good answer there because it's honestly really hard for me to pinpoint this one.
Yeah.
I agree. Reflective.
Reflective is a good term too, yeah.
I would say calming. I like that. It makes you feel like it's going to be okay. It's something that I remember listening to this one on the way to the, well, I'll call it the first leg of the Tilt of the Wind No More
Mhm.
tour because I don't think that tour had a name. Um, they went to
Yeah, it was
Grand
just like,
Rapids.
yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
It was like a 5 hour drive up to Grand Rapids, Michigan. I remember singing, I was singing to all the songs and just, yeah, this one makes me feel a little bit differently than the rest of the tracks.
Yeah.
And I can't quite pinpoint it either. But yeah, so are you ready to talk some lyrics?
Yeah.
We've mentioned some of them, but let's just dive in and talk through them all. If you want, we can talk through as many as you want. So I don't have to ask this question because there are lyrics that obviously speak to you in this one.
Right.
You've already pointed one out.
Yeah.
Actually, you've pointed a few out. I'm looking at the lyrics right now. We've talked about a few of these, but I definitely want to get into them. Remind me of the. So what's the one that you have on your arm?
So hard catching your breath if you never slow down.
Oh, from the bridge, right?
Yeah. And the bridge I feel like is definitely the part that hits hardest for me, and especially too because it's got the title in it too, because Tilting at the Wind. And I always like feel very special like with title tracks and stuff like that. I always especially if it's not necessarily in the title of the song, if it's just in the song, I always think that's a really cool move.
I agree with you. I heard that the other day on a different album, and I couldn't even tell you which one it was.
Mhm.
But I remember thinking, oh, I kind of like that when you can hear the title of the album and the lyrics, but it's
Yeah.
not necessarily the title of that song. But it's kind of like an Easter egg in a way. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
that's where the name came from.
Yeah. I know there's a Metric album I was listening to the other day too that did that. I was like, "Oh, there's the title." Yeah.
I remember when Andrew was on this very podcast and he described what that meant. When he said what the name of the album was going to be, because it was right before it came out.
Right.
It was like 2 months before it came out, and they had just announced the name of it and what that meant to him. If anybody's curious, go back to episode 53. Andrew was on the podcast and he talked about lying on the hood of your car, but he did talk about the album at large as well and what the title means. So, but again, we can also draw our own meaning, like we were talking about earlier. You talked a little bit about this earlier, Celeste, that you kind of felt stagnant at the time. And it says in the lyrics here, he felt like he was running in circles,
Yeah.
tilting at the wind. And then it goes into this very lyric that you have tattooed now. So hard catching your breath if you never slow down. So it's a great bridge musically too. Something I noticed earlier when I was listening to it just today, and I'm sure I've noticed it before, but it just popped into my mind while I was kind of listening from the perspective of, hey, I'm going to be talking about this song soon.
Right.
Is there's these little guitar notes in the bridge that it never really popped out at me before.
Mhm.
That was pretty cool, and it kind of makes that bit that we were just talking about a little bit, kind of makes it pop a little bit more.
Yeah. The music definitely changes in the bridge too. I think it goes and it's more like minor chord heavy
Okay.
and then goes back into the major key. So
I appreciate you bringing the musician perspective because that's something that I never have. I'll never have, but it's always neat to hear these
yeah.
other these other perspectives. So the verses to me are basically a story
Mhm.
that anybody could relate to, right? Just about any one of us. We're driving, we're thinking deeply, we're questioning our lives, our goals, our purpose
Mhm.
sometimes. I don't know about you, but I love driving. I love it. So like when you say to get back to your family, it's a 4.5 hour drive,
Mhm.
or then when you got to go back home, my family lives about 4 hours away, so pretty similar. And usually it's with my family, but if it's by myself, it's kind of a different thing, right? Because then you can put on some music and you can kind of think and you're
Yeah.
just kind of alone in your thoughts. Even my commute to work in the morning, some mornings is an hour. Depending on where I'm going, it's 2 hours. I don't mind. Some people don't like those drives, but I like getting in the car and driving and just
Yeah.
thinking and listening to music and being alone in my thoughts because it's a very reflective time for me.
Mhm.
Not so much your thing though, huh?
Not every day.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do an hour. My commute to work right now is only a 5 minute drive, so that's
Okay.
really I get one song. Yeah.
Side note, I'm very fortunate. I work from home 4 days a week, and
Oh, okay, good.
I only have to commute the one. So
Okay, cool.
that's why, yeah. So maybe I'm very privileged
That's
in
better.
saying like, oh, I like my commute, but
Yeah. When I am driving back home, I do enjoy that drive just because it's one that now I'm like familiar with and it's a good time. Like I'll usually like, I can, it's like a good amount of time to listen to like an entire discography of
Mhm.
like maybe like a regular band, maybe not all of Andrew's music. Like,
Sure, yeah.
and like that would take a
You
little
got to
longer,
vary it
but
up.
like, yeah, so I'll usually like pick like one artist or like I'll go in like albums and that's like my like personal concert time. Like I
Uh-huh.
like to just like have my music and then like sing along. But I do definitely like have like that kind of introspective moment, too. Especially like when you're driving in like the Midwest where everything is very flat. Yeah, and I mean like I said, the first time this song like really hit me was when I was driving. So that's kind of a neat parallel there.
The lyrics are they're kind of funny at times, but they're also very poetic. Like most of it's pretty serious, but I'm just going
Yeah.
to read through the first verse right here. Stuck on the highway, 11 a.m. I'm driving through LA in traffic again. I thought I was a writer, but lately I feel like a hack. They called me a hero, but I was a sinner. I drank before lunch and I took drugs with dinner, then burned every bridge that I crossed on the long journey back. And then we lead to the chorus, but I love those lyrics. Those are some pretty special lyrics to me.
Yeah.
It's the storytelling that you were talking about that Andrew's so good at. What feels like so normal for any of us. Some of the stuff feels so normal just driving in traffic, but
Right.
then he hits us with "They called me a hero, but I was a sinner." I mean, that's kind of gets your attention.
Yeah.
And then just the kind of like tongue in cheek, I drank before lunch and I took drugs with dinner to kind of rhyme with that. I like that. But then he goes right back to the serious, then burned every bridge that I crossed on the long journey back. And you can kind of imagine what that make your own meaning, but also imagine what he might be getting at there. I really like the verse lyrics here.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like I think that everyone is like thinking a lot about like imposter syndrome lately too, and so it feels kind of
Hmm.
like that. Like, oh, I
Definitely.
feel like a hack. Even when you're successful and everyone is like praising you, and but still like not feeling like I guess worthy.
It's not unexpected that it's coming out in his lyrics because he's talked about that, on
Yeah.
Camp Wilderness or on, Instagram or whatever.
Right.
That, that whole idea of when he comes out with a new song or he's putting out new music, coming out with an album, putting together a tour, he's like, are people going to come out? Are they
Right.
still going to come out for this? Are people going to keep being curious or interested in
Yeah.
what I'm doing?
Which is so crazy to think about as a fan, right? Like, because
Yeah.
you're like, well, yeah, duh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I get it because like that. I feel like all of us feel that way. Like whether it's
Sure.
with work or just like whatever we're like our like hobbies or anything is like, oh, am I good enough? Am I good
Hmm.
enough to be doing this? And like I struggle with that very frequently, and I think that's a pretty normal like thing to struggle with. And so yeah, I like that lyric too.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, there's a part of the reason I left my last career
Mhm.
because of that. Just
Yeah,
didn't feel like I was the right fit for that, that I had the right personality, that I was good
yeah,
enough, that I should be doing that. Like someone else could be better at
right.
helping people. And so, yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I can heavily relate to that. And then I find that, and I do something so different for work now, but I still get that feeling like, well, but I'm not that good at it, and
Yeah,
despite people telling you that you're good at it or
I
like
know.
hey you still like but no they're just wrong they don't really know
Right,
and you
exactly. Yeah,
convince yourself these negative thoughts
yeah.
so
And it's hard. Like
yeah
you get it, like you said, like you get stuck in that kind of pattern of thinking, and then it's hard to get out of it.
it truly is. I do like how the first verse to the second verse is quite a transition. I mean, you get a chorus in
Yeah.
between, but he's literally talking about what he talked about in that interview, right? I passed the apartment at Sunset and Vine where I lived with my friends and we smoked ourselves blind. So again,
Mhm.
more of a tongue-in-cheek line there. This line you mentioned earlier, it's crazy how time can turn chaos and crime into magic.
Mhm.
Today I'll make music, drive home to the beach, kiss my daughter goodnight as she's falling asleep. I live with this hunger, but everything I need, I have it.
Mhm.
I just think that second verse is so different from the first because the first is like cynical and
Yeah.
negative and looking back on this wayward past or whatever. And then this, by the end of the second verse, he's looking ahead, like, look at all I have,
Right.
how great this turned out. Somehow this turned out so great. I have this daughter, and even though I live with this hunger as an artist, I have everything.
Yeah.
I achieved the dream, you know?
You know, it kind of reminds me of the lyrics to Birthday Song.
Oh, yeah.
If you think about where it's like he's talking about, Cecilia again, but he's like where he says, "Come back to Earth, kid. You're doing well, like where you are. You have a good job, you have a good wife, you have a good daughter, like just like I don't know, that kind of like appreciating what you have while still acknowledging that you have this innate desire to like create or do something more.
Hmm.
It's a hard, like conflict to have. It's pretty deep, like being happy with where you're at, but also desiring more is,
Hmm.
I think, and I feel like that's kind of like taboo. People are like, like, oh, be grateful for what you have, but even though you might have it really well, you can still desire more and like want to do things and stuff. It's yeah.
Yeah, want to become better, achieve more, and it's interesting you point that out because you're right. It is a little bit taboo.
Mhm.
People are like, "Well, you're pretty fortunate in what you do have, and you should,
Right.
come and kind of like that come back to earth kid quote from Birthday Song. You should appreciate what you have, and that's
Mhm.
what people are saying. But then again, it's okay to want to
Yeah.
achieve more as well at the
Right.
same time. You can do both. You can be
Yeah.
grateful and have the hunger as well as he
Yeah.
puts it.
It's not mutually exclusive.
True.
When he's talking about where he says, "I live with my friends and we smoked ourselves blind." That's so funny because every time I listen to that lyric, I just picture him and Bobby sitting together and like sharing a joint. And I'm like, oh, that probably is what was happening.
Right, exactly. Did
Yeah.
you catch the latest Camp Wilderness video where they did a Q&A?
Yeah, I
Um,
watched a little part of it yesterday.
okay. So I loved that because it's just neat to see some of these people, these musicians you admire,
Hmm.
and in such a laid back atmosphere and casual
Yeah,
atmosphere, and just being friends and just talking how they would normally talk. That was interesting to me because
that's when.
he
Yeah,
wasn't talking to a journalist. He wasn't,
yeah,
putting on any kind of show. It was just like, this is who I am. This is how
yeah.
I feel right now.
I love, and that's one thing too that makes like these shows especially like seem really special to me is that you can tell that they're all friends, you know.
Yeah.
Where it's like some bands, it's like, oh, okay, whatever, we got to do this. But like these
Mhm.
guys, you're like, okay, like you guys like each other.
So on to the chorus. So he sings, "Oh, I won't lie. When I was young and high, crossing the distance, flying got me there faster." And you can kind of make probably a couple different meanings of what
Mhm.
he's saying here, but you can stare at the runway lights, dreaming of days in flight, but don't you go crash land twice, you little disaster. We get the title of the song here, but one of the most memorable for me lyrics here, and I'm not going to say it's my favorite lyric, but it's just memorable,
Mhm.
is the last line in the chorus, but don't you go crash land twice. So earlier, I asked you what you thought about. Sounds like he's referring back to his earlier years, his younger years,
Mhm.
as if he crash landed, as if he basically failed
Yeah.
and had to come back from it. Is that how you interpret it? That's kind of where what the meaning I took from it, and that he's telling himself, "Now don't do that again. Don't go back there."
I guess I never really, yeah, I haven't really thought about that one before, but it makes a lot of sense, like kind of knowing like how he was feeling. Like I've heard him talk about, like the post something corporate days in between something corporate and Jack's,
Hmm.
just about like struggling there. And I guess maybe trying not to just like him reminding himself like, oh, don't flip this up like you did last, which is interesting now to like listen to it in these years where it's like, oh, okay, well, everyone is like happy again,
Hmm.
like, back together. But yeah, I can imagine it was really difficult,
Yeah.
especially like, like going from and, being so young, like, and having that, like, I can't even imagine, like, I was, what I was doing when I was 20, not that, like, uh,
Right.
so,
I know. Yeah, yeah, it's such a different experience when you're a known artist and people are all looking at you and expecting these things of you, and to a degree we all have that as human beings. We all have that a little bit, of course, expectations and people, trying to help you along or kind of looking at you, but it's a little bit different when you're in a spotlight and
right.
you're an artist and you have like a fan base and your career is
Yeah.
based upon people liking you and liking the thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
That's something I will never be able to relate to,
No, it's crazy.
and don't want to have to
No,
relate to.
No, not for
A lot of
me.
pressure.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too. Like even like I'll mention like stuff, like because I obviously I travel a lot for these shows, and so like I'll
mhm.
mention like parents at work will want to know like, oh, where are you going? And so I tell them, and like I'll mention Andrew McMahon, and they don't know who he is, and then I'll say something corporate, and then they are like, oh yeah, I know them, or like I'll say Jack's Mannequin, and they're like, oh yeah, I know Jack's Mannequin, and so like
Okay.
stuff like that, where it's like you have these like, known projects that are pretty like well known, and then like fearing that you're gonna mess it up again,
Hmm.
like this time. Yeah,
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It's hard for me to understand, but I could definitely see it for
yeah.
sure.
I also think it's interesting too because this is another airplane metaphor, and I feel like there's certain like metaphors that he uses very frequently.
Hmm.
And so like any like sky related ones, so like and a lot of airplane stuff usually.
On this album, he does, but also, yeah, in the past, he has, even way back to his pre Leaving Through the Window, that song, there's a song called Airports.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I think that just like also structurally, it's really interesting to have
Mhm.
it end the exact same way that it begins.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. For me, it kind of symbolizes like, okay, we're taking this trip to the past, like thinking about it, and then again, now we're coming back into the present. Like, oh, I'm back on the highway, so it's like it's his memory, like while he's driving. Kind of like I feel like it's very like just a very like powerful storytelling mechanism there.
I agree. And in fact, the first two lines, as you pointed out, are at the end of the song. But
Hmm.
I don't know if I ever realized this until I'm sitting here reading the lyrics. He ends the song with "Stuck on the highway, 11 a.m. I'm driving through LA in traffic again,"
Hmm.
and I'm assuming this is right. And then the song ends with "It's crazy how time can turn chaos and crime into magic."
Yeah.
So he actually pulls that from the second verse,
Hmm.
which I never really put that together. I like so he pulls back the beginning of the song and then one of those really impactful lines,
Yeah.
arguably, from the second verse from the middle of the song and
Yeah.
ends with it. So that's a really cool, kind of trick.
Yeah. It feels like it's heavy, like reminiscing like about the past there. I can't think of any other songs where he does that. I mean, there might be some, but
I think he comes back around to the first lines. I know I've talked about that before, but I don't know if he's come back around to the first lines and then like pulled something else from the middle of the song.
yeah,
Maybe he has, but speaking of that line, I'll say that's one of my favorite lines of the song. It's
yeah,
crazy how time can turn chaos and crime into magic. One of the couple of my favorites right there. It's just so poetic and it can mean different things to different people, which I can
mhm,
always appreciate. I'm sure it means something very specific to Andrew, probably,
mhm.
or it just sounded cool. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. But
Probably both.
yeah, probably both. Yeah, it is a cool line though. Do you have a favorite line or part of the song?
Yeah, the bridge for sure.
Makes sense.
I think that when it gets to that part, like running in circles, just like I don't know, that's like the core message of the song to me.
Hmm.
I just love it.
The other line I really love in this song, probably my other favorite, is and we've talked about this one. I live with this hunger, but everything I need, I
Mhm.
have it, and
Yeah,
just the dynamic that's in that just single line there, just that whole idea that we talked about of, you can appreciate the things that you have, be grateful, but you can also still want more and still
mhm.
try to achieve more and want for more. Especially as an artist, it's understandable why that should be a thing. Is there anything else about this song that we haven't talked about yet that makes this one really special for you?
Yeah, I mean, just the timing for it was really important to me. Like, and the whole album in general. Like, I listened to it front to back so many times.
Hmm.
And I do think that it was nice to have it come out when there was a lot of hype around other projects, or nice to have it, like, still have it. Because, like, if I'm ranking my favorite wilderness projects, like, this is the top of the wilderness projects for me for sure. But probably, like, just like top in general out of all of his music. I just think that the lyrics, like, I have so much admiration for him, like, as a lyricist. He just, like, knows how to write things that are good. Like, he's a poet.
Yeah.
And so just like the storytelling aspect of this album is fabulous to me. And that's something I really appreciate in any music. So
You love this artist and you listen to them for years and you
Mhm.
follow each album and you think, oh, this is so good. I can't imagine they're going to make something even better.
Right.
And then he'll drop something like this and yeah. I mean, this song is one of those for me. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, that kind of surprised me.
Yeah. Well, and it was exciting for me too to have, because I missed the something corporate days. Like
Hmm.
I was too young for that, and like
Sure.
I missed most of the Jack's Mannequin. I think I like hopped on like probably like right as Jack's Mannequin was ending and stuff, and so and like I said, like was the first Wilderness album, and so it was exciting for me to have. Now I have this community and like these friends to have us all be excited about something at the same time.
Hmm.
Like I know I talked about this with my mom too. I was like, wow, I'm so excited to have more Andrew content like
Yeah.
on the tour because I've missed it.
Yeah.
Like even in just this like short hiatus like after the cruise. So it's nice to be able to have like, you bond with your friends and your community. Yeah.
It's so nice that we have this network of, like you said, the Midwest contingent, but then
Yeah.
the whole Andrew fan network at large, if you will,
Yeah, it's awesome.
that we can, can fan out over, every nugget of information,
Yeah.
every concert, he like Jack's, as of this recording, Jack's just played a show in Texas last night. And
Yeah.
so saw somebody posted the set list, and like, it's
Yep.
just cool kind of looking at that stuff and getting
Yeah.
excited. And
Or like all the dates in the Discord and they start to like come up and you're like, oh my gosh. And like the cruise is really special too because that was the first. I mean, that was the first time I met you in
Mhm.
person. And but like just like a whole bunch of people,
Yeah,
like who I just knew from like the internet, and then it's
right.
like, oh my gosh, you're a real person,
Yeah, exactly. Like you see all these names and you hear
right?
about people and you're just like, and then we're all in at the same time in the same place. So
Right.
that's
I had a lot of people that would introduce me to themselves to me, like with the also with their Instagram handle, so I knew who they were.
sure.
They're like, oh, it's me. I'm like, oh yeah, I know you. Yeah. So,
I did have somebody right off the bat at the hotel the night before we cruised out. We were talking for a while, and then she's like, What's your Instagram handle?" And she was like, "Oh, I know who you are now." And I was like,
yeah.
"Oh, I hope that's a good thing." I don't
Well,
know.
I don't know, and I don't know if you've heard this story, so I'll be the first one to tell you. But me and my mom and our friend Anne, right, who I cruised with, but we were watching the something corporate set with these people from Texas, and so he had mentioned he was like, "Oh, have you heard of something in the wilderness?" And like the podcast, and we were like, "Oh yeah," and he's like, "Did you know the guy that does it is on this cruise?" And we are like, "Yeah, we know him." That's really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow, this is like a really like close knit group of people. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that
It's
was
just
awesome.
interesting to all come together, and like we all have our our own things, and like that's what's exciting to me about even going to the shows on land,
Hmm.
cruise aside even. I walk into the Newport in Columbus, or Kemba it's going to be this year,
Right.
and you see people that you've seen before. Maybe you
Yeah.
don't know them that well, but you're like, "Oh, that I met him at the last show, or I was
Yeah.
in line with that person last time." And
Or you can always make friends with whoever's
yeah.
there. At every single Andrew show I've been to, I end up talking to people who
Mhm.
I'm just like standing by and just like being able to be friends with them because we all like the same thing.
Well, thanks so much for joining me today,
Yeah, this is
Celeste. I
awesome.
really appreciate you joining the show, and I want to thank
Yeah.
everybody out there who listens to the show. I love reading the messages and Instagram comments. It makes me excited to keep doing this, frankly. But the best reason is right here, is like getting to talk to fans like yourself, and making these connections, and coming together as a community, and being part of this thing. Kind of it's music that brought us all together.
Yeah.
But it's just more than that, as human beings. So I love this. So thank you for being a part of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I don't think. Well, yeah, we will be at one of the same. So I'll, if I don't see you before then, I'll see you in the Detroit show in November. It's a little
Yeah.
ways out, but we'll see
It'll
you
be fun
there.
enough.
Yeah, for sure. And then hopefully on the cruise next year, I assume you're
Oh yeah.
going. I
We're
guess
going.
as much as we've talked about it, I figured. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't imagine. But
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully we'll get some news soon. I do. Just thinking we will. Thinking we're gonna hear
Yeah.
something soon.
I know.
So
I saw six men posting some suspicious comments.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Comments back to people like soonish,
Like
and
the eyeball emoji.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
Everybody's yeah. We're all like, wait a second, what does that mean?
I know.
So,
Every time I get a notification from Pillar, and I'm like, okay, and then it's not.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Celeste, and keep in touch. We'll be talking soon. And as always, for everybody else, feel free to DM me on Instagram or email somethinginthewilderness@gmail.com. We can chat about Andrew, or anything else you want. So hard catching your breath if you never slow down. And by the way, I had that quote written before I knew that was your tattoo.
Nice.